Now, the BuckeyeXtra podcast with Joey Kaufman and Rob Oller from the Columbus Dispatch.
Welcome back, everyone. It's the BuckeyeXtra football podcast. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by Rob Oller. Ohio State is 3-0, gone through the non-conference portion of the schedule and ended that stretch with a 37-9 win over Ohio on Saturday night, and Oberlin College remained the last in-state opponent to beat the Buckeyes. Those guys are popping champagne like the 72 Dolphins. They're still stands, Rob. Those guys can celebrate.
They can, man. They're probably, what are they, about 160 years old now or something?
They still get together for reunions every now and then.
Yeah, they can. You know, they've tapped into their Methuselah, and they're still going strong somewhere, hopefully. Yeah, it was an interesting game, a little dicey for a while against the Bobcats. There was no pregame mascot on mascot crime. We need to get that out of the way. I mean, everybody played nice. In fact, I think they probably, forced Rufus to lose these little in-game tug-of-war contests that they had in-game to kind of kumbaya, Brutus and Rufus are buddies again. Whatever. But that was sort of the sideshow all week. Maybe the most interesting part of the matchup going into it.
It was rigged. They just let Brutus win this tug of war.
It was rigged, totally rigged. From a competitive spirit standpoint, I was very disappointed. And then the real Bobcats put up a fight. They clawed their way. I believe it was 13-3 at half. It was like 3-0 for
13-3 at halftime, and then 13-9 early in the third quarter when Parker Navarro came in and threw a 60-plus yard touchdown pass and made it a little interesting there, where it was a one-score game, and it was odd. It was an odd game because Ohio State is just outgaining them. If you look at the total yardage throughout the game, it felt like Ohio State should have pummeled them. And even the way it ended up, Ohio State had 572 total yards. Ohio U had 181. I mean, this should not have been a competitive game, but it was early in the third quarter, largely because Ohio State kept shooting itself in the foot near the goal line.
Yeah, they had some real red zone issues. I think they were 5 of 6 in the red zone. So if you just look at that on paper, it's like, well, what's the problem? Well, 3 of those were field goals. And well, I'm sure we'll get to this, but Julian Sayin looked really good between the 20s. He's really, he is a marksman in terms of really being able to find receivers, hit them in stride, but a little bit, he runs out of running room, I guess is a way to put it, inside the 20, and he can't get Jeremiah Smith and Carl Tate, running loose down the field. So everything gets a little more compacted and a little less operating room. And then, as you said, Joey, they shot themselves in the foot. It was penalties. It was they just didn't execute as Ryan Day said, which reminds me of the famous, we always talk about execution, the famous John McKay line when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were like 0-14 or something, and a reporter asked, what do you think of your team's execution? And McKay said, I'm all for it. One of the great lines in college football history, really sports history, from quote. And I only bring that up because Ryan Day was talking about execution and just need to execute better down in the red zone.
I'm sure he's in favor of it as well.
Yeah, he probably was at moments in that game. He got pretty red-faced, not real happy with what was happening. Defensively, they're really good. They gave up the one play, which was unusual. I wrote about that. It was shocking because they just don't do that like they used to. I remember, Joey, what was it, maybe 2021 or 20 or 19, when they were giving up chunk plays and explosives, and that was this huge issue. And now you never hear anything about it until it happens, and it's just like, I can't believe that just happened.
Yeah, it was outside of that one play. Ohio U basically just had a smidge over 100 yards of total offense. And part of that was Parker Navarro was out for a long stretch in the second quarter, and that certainly limited them. But the Buckeyes defense did look pretty good. To me, it really, this game was told in the way the score ended up being because of the red zone issues. Because you mentioned 3 times they settled for field goals. And not only did they settle for field goals inside the red zone, but they settled for 2 of those 3 field goals inside the 5-yard line. And that is you are so close to the goal line can be pretty difficult to stomach. And at those times, they had stuff where it appeared open. The first time they got inside the red zone was on their opening drive, and they went all the way down there, and it was 4th down. They went for it, and they've continued to be aggressive on some of those 4th down opportunities. This is the one time they didn't get any points inside the 20. Julian Sayin had C.J. Donaldson wide open in the flat and missed him and took a step forward in the pocket, and it looked like maybe he was then going to try to scramble, but then he gets sacked, and they end up with nothing. And then one of the other times they were inside the 10, he had Brandon Innes open in the flat and didn't see him there. So those are just 2 instances, and Julian Sayin had a pretty good day all in all, especially the way he can throw the deep ball. And it was only a matter of weeks ago where we were discussing, are they going to take some shots downfield with Julian Sayin? And he's sort of put those questions to rest. They certainly have a big play capability on offense, as evidenced by the throws of 47 and 49 yards for touchdowns that Julian Sayin had to Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. But punching it in and finishing those drives will certainly give them something to clean up as far as things go on their off week here.
Yeah, and you wrote about this. I think if there was a breakout moment or a breakout star, it was freshman tailback Bo Jackson. I think we were talking about, even before the game, Joey and I were talking about the run game, about it could be a concern because they don't seem to have, the C.J. Donaldson and James Peoples are good backs, but they didn't, it's unfair to them in a sense because you're comparing them to Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson from a year ago. And Henderson had a lot of speed and burst, and Judkins, could really, he was Mr. Inside. But neither of those guys, I don't think Donaldson is Judkins and Peoples was not Henderson. So it was like, well, what are they going to do about the running game? And then Bo Jackson enters and he shows burst, shows some real ability. Kind of, I don't know who you would compare him to, but you did write about him. And I think that's if you're an Ohio State fan, you're like, okay, we got something here now. It's a little less worrisome than it was entering the game. Not that there was major concern, but it's like, okay, we got a back now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that is if you were looking at the big picture of this Ohio State football season of what was learned in week 3 and sort of what could make a difference over the long regular season and into the postseason, it's the emergence of Bo Jackson, who gives them a different element out of the backfield than they have with Peoples or Donaldson. And that's just because of that explosiveness that he has. In the last 2 weeks alone, he has 4 runs of 15 yards or more, 2 of those 50 or more yards. So he clearly, I think you just watch him run, the way he shuffles his feet. He always seems like he's able to move quickly, and he's a second away from slipping through and hitting something. And that is something I don't think they have with Peoples or Donaldson. I think maybe Peoples has some explosiveness, but the one thing that Ryan Day mentioned about Bo Jackson that you see is the vision, and that 60-plus yard run he had against Ohio, that doesn't begin with just a big hole or he's out in space. I mean, he slips through a gap there and really kind of slips and sneaks between 2 linebackers. So he sees it and hits it and then hurdles the safety, and then he's off. So for a freshman, he's got really good patience and vision as well as a runner. And for Ohio to have some explosiveness out of the backfield is truly much needed, because that was I think a concern coming into this season. And we'll have to see how Bo Jackson holds up against a tougher level of competition and just over the long haul of a season, because he's going from high school to college, and this is such a long season. So can he handle the workload? But that aside, his ability to make big plays and some hits and home runs, they need it because their explosiveness on offense before his emergence was really, it felt like it was all going to come through the passing game. And when Ohio State's been at its best on offense in the Ryan Day era, you look at 19 or last year in 24, it's been when they've been able to be explosive in multiple ways on offense, either through the run game or the pass game. When they've maybe it felt like haven't sort of lived up to their potential, it was more during the Stroud era where they never had maybe the running game to be explosive, to complement their big strike ability through the air.
Yeah, I would even go back further. It triggered an idea here as you were talking, that look at their national titles going all the way back. You had Hopalong Cassidy. You go in 1968, you had Jim Otis, and you had John Brockington. And then you go into 2002 with Maurice Clarett, and 14 with Zeke Elliott. And then last year with the Trevion Henderson Judkins combo. Their national titles, and if you're an Ohio State fan, you're always thinking national championship. You've got really good run game and not just mediocre. I do think that J.K. Dobbins was really, really good. But he got hurt. He got hurt in the second half of the Clemson game. Maybe they win it all, maybe they don't. So to your point, you have to have a super strong run game. Yeah,
you have to at least have one that can complement the pass, certainly, because you're not going to win through. I mean, football it's changed where everything is going to be pass forward now, but to not be able to have sort of an explosiveness out of the backfield or just something you can lean on at times. Last year felt pretty balanced among all those national championship teams you mentioned. Last year felt like they could kind of win either way through the air or through the run, where maybe in 14 or 02 or back in the 60s and 50s, it was certainly you were going to lean on your backs, and the passing game was almost an afterthought with some of those teams. Last year felt like it was a sort of a balanced deal.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. What areas of concern they've shored up the run game? What areas of concern are still out there?
This is not really an area of concern because honestly, they haven't really showed a lot on film. That's you watch Ohio State play and it's something that looks really awry. Maybe they're red zone issues, but I do think they'll get that cleaned up. But to me, the way things could change, the way we look at this Ohio State team, is Arch Manning got booed last Saturday and through a long stretch of incompletions. And what if it turns out that Texas is just sort of an 8 or 9 win team this season, and we look back where Ohio State maybe stumbles later on in the regular season, and then that Texas win in week 1 proves not to be what we maybe expected it would be, and Arch is not who we thought he was going to be as a quarterback. So that honestly is what I'm just trying to apply the transitive property in college football, which is always a little dangerous and scoreboard watching through only 3 weeks, but
that's what college football is, Joey.
We're trying to make sense. We're trying to make sense of limited data in college football, but that, for me, is like the thing that sticks out the most, because it's hard to really nitpick all that much in games against Grambling and Ohio. But maybe that Texas win is not as shiny and significant as we thought it would be if the way things look for Texas lately. And it's a long season, but Arch was 11 of 25 passing against UTEP for 114 yards with a touchdown and an interception. That's not Heisman Trophy
ish.
Yeah.
Oh, I would agree. There are years like that. I remember in 06, I think it was 06, when, it was supposedly team of the century and Ohio State was blowing everybody out. Then they had that really, classic game against Michigan. And I remember a little bit of a red flag at that point because the Ohio State's defense gave up something like, I don't know what it was, 40 points, 38 points. It was like, then they go and just get they get wiped out by Florida. And then you look back at the end of that season, and it was like, well, how good was the Big Ten? Who really did they play? And so, to your point, you want Texas to be really, really good now, and I think their defense is legit, but it's their offense. It's their Texas defense, but their offense is right now a little shaky. So, how good is Ohio State against really good teams? Don't we write that story every year, though? Every year, it's like, well, how good are they against the good teams?
Well, I think Texas is certainly at least a ranked.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Probably even a. I mean, right now it's still ranked in the top 10. It's just,
but they're not number one.
They're not number one, and you just wonder how things look like when they really, because they've only played San Jose State and UTEP the last 2 weeks, but Arch has not really put the thumping on those teams that maybe you thought he could, the way Julian Sayin has against Grambling State and Ohio. They have not really responded in the same way Ohio State has responded since that game. So that certainly has your attention. They're sort of a funny program right now because Steve Sarkisian is now getting questions about whether he can handle sort of the head coaching and should he remain the play caller as well, and does he juggle those roles? Feels like a conversation we had about Ryan Day just a couple years ago.
Good point. I think if you took Arch Manning's name and put it on Julian Sayin's back of his jersey, Julian Sayin would be the Heisman leader right now.
Yeah. I think
it's a name recognition thing. I mean, Sayin has outplayed Arch Manning, and maybe his name is in the conversation already. It's so early. I know they start these Heisman watches before any games are even played, so that's how things have changed. But if Sayin keeps doing this, not to jump into into that soup of early Heisman talk, but if he keeps doing what he's doing, he'll be in the conversation, as will probably Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah. But to go back to Texas, that to me is the thing that keeps rattling around in my brain, because even a lot of the questions that we had about Ohio State, to me, maybe after Texas or even after Grambling State, was just, you wondered about, do they have the explosiveness out of the backfield? Can they complement the quarterback? I think Bo Jackson showed signs of that being addressed last week. Then you thought about the pass rush, and they lost so much there. Can the defensive linemen generate pressure? Well, Caden Curry, I thought, had a really nice showing against Ohio with a sack and a pass breakup. Both of those on third down. They had a season high 4 sacks, which is more than they had in the first 2 games combined. So good step forward there. There just is not a lot of really holes to quibble with right now, the way Ohio State is moving. You can look at maybe the red zone, but I view that as more of a result of one game than sort of a systemic thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a Psych 101 devotee like Ryan Day, and coaches love to use these kind of games and say, and it was sort of a perfect game for a coach, because you've got these miscues especially after 70-0 against Grambling. Buckeyes are thinking they're all that. This is going to be an easy season, blah, blah, blah. And now he can go back and grind them a little bit during the off week and get them ready for Washington in 2 weeks, work on the red zone offense, work on the things that, didn't go well against Ohio University, and have them ready. And we talked about this. It's like a perfect setup. The schedule was set up perfectly. You had this tough game early, then you had a cakewalk, kind of get healthy from the Texas game, which was a dogfight. And then you have Ohio University, which isn't supposed to be much of a game, but kind of turns into one early. And now you have the off week to kind of reset, get ready for the Big Ten season. So I think it really sets up well for them.
Yeah, it's broken up in some neat pieces where you have 2 byes, almost at like the third and 2/3 markers of the regular season. Not quite, but almost like that. So you have some obviously built-in rest periods, and it's why they moved it's why they wanted to get out of the UConn game this year, because that was going to be in October, and they would have had one of their off weeks in week 2. So you would have had really 2 bye weeks in September. That would have been a little goofy.
Right. Anyhow, we got anything else for us?
I think
What's that behind you, by the way? Is that like an old dispatch? What is that framed piece of art behind you?
it's
For those watching.
the first edition of the Dispatch in 1871. You had, I think you were on the inside from that.
Yeah, I was on that staff. Yeah, exactly. Ha ha. All right. What else? Is that it?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you talk about some of the things, the questions they addressed, or sort of things that are concerning. Even some of those I thought they addressed against Ohio U, because Max Clarer was sort of a curiosity the first two games, where he's somebody they brought in as a transfer and led the Boilermakers in receiving, but had a quiet start. I think it was good for him to get his first touchdown with the Buckeyes. Did a nice job when the play broke down and Julian Sain had a scramble. He followed along and they found an opening for him in the end zone and was able to get on the board. He's not probably going to put up the same numbers he had at Purdue last year, because Ohio State has more weapons than he had alongside him last year. But overall, I think he's going to be an important part of what they do, and he's really almost like having an extra slot receiver with his passing ability. So good for him to get on the board. They still continue to lean on the tight ends quite a bit this year, because you have him, you have Will Kazmarek, you have Jelani Thurman. Bennett Christian's been part of that rotation. He did not play against Ohio U. He has some sort of an injury, but they are deep at that position, and they're willing to use multiple tight end packages.
Yeah, and you know what? They made some field goals. They got a little practice in, 3 field goals, 3 for 3, with the kicker. And we talked during the game. One thing that we're shaking our head about a little bit is Joey and I are not a big fan of putting Jeremiah Smith back on punt coverage, on punt return. Just doesn't make a lot of sense to make that risk. And I know people are like, well, you can't worry about injuries, A, and B. Well, if this guy is all that, why not use him? We saw Caleb Downs last year score on a punt return. I'm a little surprised that Caleb Downs isn't back there instead of Jeremiah Smith. But I don't know. I'm sure fans are kind of mixed on this, and there's some grimacing going on when they see him back there.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it in the game, because I said, why are you putting Jeremiah Smith back there? And you brought up the point and said, I said he's their most valuable player. And you said, well, Caleb Downs might be their most valuable player. So I'm not sure. I think probably the same argument could apply with both of those.
Well, I agree. I agree with that. Somehow, this is terrible. Maybe, but Caleb Downs seems a little tougher, or a little bit like he's not going to get as injured because he's a safety. That's just perception based on the position he plays, and because he did return one. So it's like you've got a body of evidence there that if you're going to put a guy back there who you think can break one, Caleb Downs has done it, I believe, at Alabama when he was there, and last year against Indiana. So if you had to choose between the two, which you don't have to choose between the two, really, especially with this team, this offense and this defense, yeah, I'm not saying you're getting greedy by trying to score on special teams. You may need that in the biggest games, but it's against an Ohio University, against a Grambling. Why do it?
Probably they want to get him some reps at it.
Yeah.
Throw him out the first time in a big time matchup where he's returning to punt for the first time. And he did line up against Texas as well, which is what prompted Ryan Day to talk about it a couple weeks ago. And I understand the idea behind it. If you put Jeremiah Smith or you put Caleb Downs back there, it's invigorating for the rest of the punt return unit, because if you have somebody who with that much playmaking ability back there, it feels like your one block could spring them loose, and it rejuvenates the whole special teams unit. If you pop a big play back there, it can change the game. I understand the idea behind it. I think there is the injury risk. It's not just because of a routine football play, but as much as that is a concern to me, I think you wonder about the potential for somebody just taking a cheap shot at Jeremiah Smith in a big game. Those guys are so high-profile player in the sport. And if Ohio State is up by multiple scores over a team and Caleb Downs or Jeremiah Smith is returning to play, you wonder if some defender or special teams guy who's a second or third string player at Ohio U just wants to do something dirty. And we've seen it with Jeremiah Smith before when they played at Northwestern last year. He got brought down in the second half of the game, and one of the Northwestern players got a hold of his ankle and gave it an extra twist at the end of the play. And that, to me, is I think is probably my bigger concern of just somebody taking a cheap shot or just some sort of extra hit that does a little something.
Yeah, I think the flip side real quick is, and I get it, I'm with you, I understand the thinking. I mean, Michigan made it work back in the day pretty well. Desmond Howard, famous punt return against Ohio State. He was a wide receiver, and then Heisman winner.
It's just a longer season, though. That to me, I think, is the difference. Is that you are trying to get these guys? This is just regular season football. I mean,
right?
That's almost the way it is now. You just need to get through the regular season and get a good seed for the playoff. Keep your team healthy and in rhythm, and then you make your run. Where that's just the way I think it is now. Where Desmond Howard was returning punts in the regular season because you couldn't afford to lose a game.
Yeah, that's a great point. Anyhow, there we have. I still, I think the jury is still a little out on Brian Hartline. It's not that they've been bad, but they struggle in the red zone. Well, is that a system issue? Mainly, it's shooting yourself in the foot, not executing. 70-0 against Grambling, hard to take anything from that. 14-7 against Texas on a really good Texas team, defense at least. Is Brian Hartline, is he a natural at play calling? And I think it's still a little bit wait and see.
Yeah, I think that's partly because of the way the schedule has lined up. To your point, because they opened against Texas, and that was the game where Ohio State was just trying to get out of there with a win, and it was almost as they were trying to slow the game down and win ugly. You don't need to be too creative, and that we not really not too creative, but it was just they were not pushing tempo. They were not trying to run 80 plays in that football game to win it. So you weren't driving 60, 70 miles per hour. And then Grambling, you don't need to do all that much. And then you have this Ohio U game. So I think Washington, this next stretch of the Big Ten will really start to tell us a lot because you go at Washington and then you have some other road games coming up. So that I think will be a little more revealing of where they are play calling wise.
Sounds good.
We sending it out?
Yep. Huh?
Sending it out.
Yeah.
You have any idle bye week thoughts? Are you planning to watch some college football or take it easy? Or this is
I'm actually heading out to Oakland, California. Going to go whale watching and down in Monterey. And my daughter lives out on the West Coast. And then we'll fly up to the Washington game from Oakland, California to Seattle. I'm sure I'll be keeping an eye on things in college football. May actually write a little bit while I'm out there. So that's kind of my plan out to you West Coaster, out to not your neck of the wood. You were a SoCal guy, but yeah, that's my plan. How about you? What do you got?
I think we're gonna go to Cleveland. You're
okay. Nice. All right. Hey, you know what? It's a good city.
Go to West Side Market.
Oh yeah, good time for sure.
Maybe some of that. It will be nice to actually watch some college football. I mean, that's the thing with our jobs is you actually don't get to watch a ton of the other games on a given weekend because you don't
get to watch. You don't get to watch your own game half the time. You're writing. Look
right
up from your laptop.
Yeah,
you're not supposed to say that probably, but hey, thank goodness for replay. That's all I got to say.
The reality of the second half.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I will say that is a nice part about some of the late games. I mean, it's sort of harder on your body just staying up to 2 a.m. writing, but you do get to watch the early noon games and some of the other ones. So that was that was nice. But we'll get to see a full slate this week: Michigan and Nebraska, and I don't think I'm going to stay up for USC Michigan State, which is at 11 p.m. Eastern time kickoff from Los Angeles. Could you imagine if Ohio State has to play one of those one day?
No.
Do you think people will be more upset? We'll conclude momentarily. But what do you think would irk fans more? Playing 5 noon games in a row, or whatever, or just having more noon games, or playing a game that is at 11 p.m. Eastern time out on the West Coast where it's 8 p.m. local?
Wow. I think it depends on the age demographic. If you're in your 20s, early 20s, night doesn't get started till about 10 p.m. But for the old fogies, the night ends at about 9:30 p.m. So I think it breaks down that way. I think the other thing, which you maybe someday we'll see, is a 9 a.m. If you live around the West Coast, a noon game. Unless they've already ruled that out. A noon game that's a 9 a.m. game on the West Coast. How would you like to wake up and you're starting to watch football at 9 a.m.?
USC had a game at 9 a.m. during the shortened COVID season where it was on the West Coast. It was 9 a.m. local, but they sort of rationalized it by saying that no fans were coming to the game
right
season. I think it's probably a real issue for getting people in the seats. But hey, UCLA can do it. I mean, it's not like they don't have that to factor in.
Right. Speaking of time things, I'm guessing we talked about this, maybe close on this. So Washington, we'll look just ahead to the kickoff. I'm guessing it'll be a Eastern time, like something like a 7:30 kickoff, probably like 3:30 maybe out there. I don't know.
3:30 is probably more likely. This will surely be dated by the time you listen to this.
3:30 Eastern, you're saying? Yeah. Right. I think like a 12:30 out there. It'll be dated, but that's what I meant, like a 3:30 Eastern time. So anyhow,
you can hold us accountable for our time
where we were wrong.
Thanks for joining us on this edition of the BuckeyeXtra Football Podcast. That was Rob Oller, and I'm Joey Kaufman. And visit us for more at dispatch.com/sports, and make sure to subscribe to this podcast as well wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. Thanks for joining us.